Because I'm on YouTube, I have an email address that is public, and because of that, I get people trying to scam me, to take over this channel, to scam you. Now, I think I'm pretty good at spotting nasty emails, and we all know that when you see an email with clearly malicious intentions, the one thing you never do is you don't click the link. But I want to. Like, I know it's a scam, but I don't know how yet. Will it be malware? A phishing email? Don't you just sometimes want to know? Obviously, if I know the link is a scam, then clicking it would be stupid. So instead I right-click. That's right-click and open in Kasm. This might look scary, but this is fine. I mean, it's fine because it's not real malware, but even if it was real, this would still be fine. This can't hurt me. This browser is isolated from the rest of my system. What about tracking? Well, this is where it thinks I am. I am nowhere near there, and neither is this browser. I'm using a nice little system called Kasm to do this, and I'm going to show you how to do it too, as well as a few other cool things you can do with Kasm. So we're on the level. Kasm said they'll pay to sponsor this video, but even if that falls through, I'm still going to keep using the software anyway. Before I show you how to set it up, I should probably explain what Kasm is. They call it a Workspace streaming platform, but it's actually a few different technologies all tied together and accessible through a web browser. You can use it for remote access. I'm using it to access my home lab from anywhere. Access what though? Well, it can act as a gateway to connect to existing Windows, Linux or Mac systems using SSH, VNC, remote desktop, a web browser, or basically any application, all through an encrypted web session. It can spin up and manage cloud-based or on-premises virtual desktop infrastructures, and what you saw me do just there was streaming a containerized app. That bit is pretty cool, because for the other stuff you need to have a system running somewhere to connect to, but the containerized apps spin up in seconds inside Docker. You get a fully featured application like the web browser I was using, and while you can persist the data and give it access to your network if you're using it as a remote working tool, you can also have it be completely disposable. So you click on it, it spins up the application, and then when you close it, the whole thing gets destroyed. In fact, Kasm was originally created as a safe way for security researchers to access nasty parts of the internet. Oh yeah, and it can also play Doom. I'm not even kidding, that's a legitimate feature and I love it. All you need to get started is a machine running Linux. I'll link the documentation below that will tell you exactly which distros are supported, as well as guides for multi-server setups for scalability and resilience. For this video, we're going to keep things simple. We'll do an all-in-one deployment on a single computer using the free Community Edition. Compared to the paid version, the Community Edition is limited to 5 simultaneous remote sessions. Besides that, it's almost identical. Just to clarify what free means, that's free as in beer, as in you don't have to pay for it. Although some components are open source, the solution as a whole isn't. You can use the Community Edition for personal, non-profit or evaluation purposes. Basically, it's free unless you're making money with it, in which case, buy a license. To get started, the first thing you'll have to do is install Docker. I'm using Rocky Linux, which being based in Red Hat, ships with Podman by default. Now, I like Podman, but Kasm needs Docker because it's not just running in containers, it's also managing containers, and Docker's what it uses to do that. For Rocky, I'll head over to Docker's website and follow the instructions for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Links will be in the video description so you can copy-paste. Next, I'll jump over to Kasm's website and use the single server installation steps. I just copy-paste this, type Y to confirm, and we're done. We just need to wait for this to finish, make a note of our passwords, and if we open up a web browser to HTTPS the IP address of our Linux computer, we have a fully functioning Kasm Workspaces install to which we can log in using the admin password from our terminal output. The security warning is because it's using a default self-signed certificate. SSL certificates are a bit outside the scope of this video, but if you have your own domain, you can get a free one from Let's Encrypt and install it in Kasm by replacing the files in these locations. Kasm has a more detailed video on setting this up with Let's Encrypt, so I'll link that below. We're going to move on to deploying some apps. Once logged in, expand Workspaces and click on Registry. This is kind of like the Kasm App Store, except that it's all free and you can add more app stores with more apps. Registries. You can add more registries. If you have a look through the default one, you'll see a selection of apps. Browsers like Chrome, Chromium, Brave, Firefox and Tor, graphics apps like GIMP and Inkscape, LibreOffice, OnlyOffice and Thunderbird for productivity, VS Code, VLC, Nessus, Steam, Discord, Audacity, and yeah, Doom. I wasn't making that up, Doom is a feature. There are also full desktop environments from various distros like Fedora, Ubuntu, Debian, Red Hat, Rocky, Kali, Oracle. There's a lot going on here. Let's install a few. Everything in this registry is containerized. In a large environment, you can run these across multiple servers or locations, but out of the box, Kasm will spin them up on demand on the same box for running Kasm itself. I'll let those images download, then if I come up here and click on Workspaces, it takes me to the end user view. This is what normal users will see. Only admins will get this button, so if you want to give access to your friends, family or colleagues, this is what it'll look like to them. You can see the apps I installed from the registry and I can launch them with a click. To be clear, I fast forwarded through the initial install and image download, but I'm showing you these launch in real time here. This is how quickly it spins them up, whether it's an app like VS Code or a full desktop like Fedora. And yes, I can play Doom in my browser, and I have wasted way too much time doing this. Actually, that's a lie. It wasn't a waste, not even a little. Let's take a quick look at some of the options I skipped over though. Back in the admin center, if I edit the workspace, you can see a bunch of settings here. Instead of adding apps from the registry, you can specify them manually, selecting your own Docker image. You can also change the amount of hardware resource allocated to your apps and add additional config down here. There's an option to add web filtering to your workspaces. In the Community Edition, this is limited to basic allowing block lists and you can enforce safe search. The paid version comes with category-based filtering. Egress gateways are how I made it think I'm on the other side of the Atlantic. You can add VPN egress providers and configure your workspaces to use them, so all the traffic gets yeeted out somewhere else on the internet. On my right-click and open in Kasm container, I have an egress VPN set up so the clicks don't come from my IP address. To set that up yourself, you just need to grab the browser extension called Kasm Open in Isolation. I'll leave links in the video description. There's a Chrome version and a Firefox version. I was actually using Microsoft Edge. The Chrome version works fine in Edge, you just add it from the Chrome Web Store. Check the extension settings and make sure to give it the address of your Kasm server. Then the only other thing you need to do is tell it which workspace you want it to open when clicked. To do that, log into Kasm and make sure you're on the main workspace dashboard. Click on your user icon in the top right, select Settings, and choose your default workspace image. The browser extension is going to open whatever you have selected as your default. There are a few other things to note in the user settings. You can add SSH keys to have it log you into Linux machines automatically, and you can set up two-factor authentication, which you should. Out of the box it supports time-based one-time passcodes or FIDO2 passkeys. If you already have a multi-factor single sign-on service, that's cool, Kasm will work with it instead. At home I use passwordless authentication via Keycloak. Kasm supports LDAP, SAML and OpenID Connect, which covers every single sign-on service that I have ever encountered. I'm happy to report that this all works in the Community Edition, so Kasm will not be featured on the single sign-on wall of shame. The last couple of tabs I ignored in the streaming workspace config was the file and storage mapping tabs. File lets you provision files into your workspace if you want to provide a more curated experience, or maybe set up a demo or control some settings. Storage lets you connect up a cloud storage provider. There's a default list, or because it's using Docker, you can also pass through volumes, like you do with a regular Docker container. Okay, I also mentioned Windows and Linux servers, and that's how I use this to access stuff in my lab. Where you set that up is under the Infrastructure section. Expand servers and bash add server. If you're doing a single server install, don't worry about zones, you'll only have one. Connection type, you'll need to choose the right connection for the type of system you're connecting to. RDP is the Microsoft Remote Desktop Protocol. It's the best option for connecting to Windows, and it is supported in every version except for the Home Edition. If you're using the Home Edition of Windows and you want to access it via Kasm, then you still have the option of using VNC. Linux is an interesting one because it can use anything here. Linux servers tend to be command line affairs without a desktop, in which case SSH is what you want. This also works for newer versions of Windows Server too. Traditionally, remote desktop on Linux meant VNC, although RDP is often baked in as a default option these days. KasmVNC is worth a mention here though, because it's been designed specifically for this use case, although it is open source and you can use it standalone without Kasm too. Despite the name, KasmVNC isn't compatible with traditional VNC clients. It is optimized specifically to provide the best performance to a web browser. This is what Kasm's containerized workspaces are using under the covers. So pick your poison here. I'll choose RDP for Windows. As some of the more seasoned among you may already suspect, this uses an Apache Guacamole container to handle the RDP connection. If you haven't heard of Guacamole, don't worry, you've probably used it. Besides Kasm, I think I've used 3 different enterprise remote access solutions this week that are all wrapping Guacamole to do the heavy lifting. Hopping back to our server config, one option you don't get in vanilla Guacamole is the Kasm desktop service. This is an optional service you can install on your Windows machine to let you transfer files, run PowerShell scripts, provision user accounts, and the like. You don't need this to access a machine, but it can be used to provide a more custom experience with additional quality of life features. Next to service in the menu, you'll also find pools. This is beyond the scope of this video as it's more for business or enterprise use. You'd use this to create a virtual desktop infrastructure type of setup. You can add pools to servers that you can load balance users across, or you can take things a step further and enable auto-scaling. You can hook Kasm up to cloud providers like AWS, Azure, Google, Oracle, and DigitalOcean, or on-prem virtualization like VMware, Nutanix, Proxmox, and Harvester. Now, in the same way that Kasm spins up containerized apps on demand, you can also have it spin up fleets of virtual machines on demand based on templates. Setting that aside, let's get access to that Windows machine I configured. As yet, it's not on our dashboard because we have to create a workspace for it. Back here, but this time we're clicking Add Workspace and choosing Server as the type. You can customize the name and description here. Top tip, if you go to dashboardicons.com, you'll find links to lots of popular app icons to use as Kasm Workspace thumbnails. Under Server, choose our Windows machine. And because it uses RDP, we have a couple of new options appear. Remote App is for use with remote desktop services farms and lets you stream individual apps. Not what we're doing here, but useful to know about for business use. RDP Client lets you choose between a web client and a local client. The web client renders the remote desktop session inside your web browser, the same as the streaming workspace apps I showed before. The local client actually generates an RDP file that you can open in the native Windows remote desktop application. The web client is more cross-platform and easy to use because it just opens right in your browser. But if you're going to be working all day in the remote session, then the native remote desktop app is a higher fidelity full desktop experience. The way this works is that Kasm acts as a remote desktop gateway. It sits on the internet and provides an additional layer of authentication and encryption, so you can do remote access over the internet without exposing your systems directly. When you connect via the gateway server, your remote desktop session is encapsulated inside an encrypted web session while it goes across the internet. You authenticate to the gateway, and it then breaks your stream out into standard remote desktop traffic within the target network. This is much safer than simply port forwarding RDP directly to your machine. I think Kasm probably ought to talk more about this, because if you use the official Microsoft Remote Desktop Gateway to do this, you have to buy remote desktop licenses for everyone who could potentially use it. If you have 100 people who could use it, but only 2 people actually using it at any given time, you need 100 licenses. Kasm can be licensed per concurrent session. So in that same setup, you'd only need to license the 2 sessions instead of the 100 potential users. There are possible cost savings here for businesses that use a gateway for occasional access to internal resources instead of a full-blown RDS farm. Disclaimer, Microsoft licensing is complicated and you need to make sure you've covered everything. I'd say ask Microsoft, but they have no idea how it works either. Anyway, I'll choose the web client, leave the rest of this at default, and now my Windows machine appears on the dashboard. And I can remotely connect to its desktop with the click of a button. That's Kasm. I think it's a pretty neat solution, which is why I agreed to work on a video with them. If you want a deeper dive in anything, drop me a comment and I'll see if I can squeeze it in. There is actually another way to deploy it using Kubernetes. Technically, I think it's still a preview, but I'm using it at home and, well, it works. Take care, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Right now, I need to do a little more testing in this Doom workspace.